Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back, Sangat Ji, after the break. If you have just joined us, we have Satpal Ji from Nanak Naam here, who's talking to us about the topic on grief and dealing with the loss of loved ones. Before I go back to Baji and we continue the discussion, I just, as I always do every week, I always have a thought of the day. The one that I have today is actually very relevant to this topic. God is the support of the unsupported, by Guru Arjan Dev Ji, Ang 1137. Baji, welcome back obviously after the break. This thought of the day, God is the support of the unsupported. It couldn't be a better picked one really for the topic that we're discussing, which then leads on to, the question that I wanted to ask you. How can the Guru's philosophy help us in the grieving process?
I think that's a very important question. We need to understand that from what I've looked at and what I've researched, I think Gurbani helps us in two distinct ways around grief. One is that Gurbani helps us how to avoid grief in the first place, and secondly, if we're dealing with grief, Gurbani shows us how to actually deal with grief. So one is to avoid grief, and let's start with that.
Yes.
Gurbani first and foremost on a daily basis tries to normalize death. What I mean by that is, in society we are almost trained to not talk about death, to not acknowledge it. Everybody knows that they're going to die, but you don't really need to talk about it. We have almost a bad habit even in Punjabi culture, like your parents might say, oh, don't talk about death.
They do. Almost
as though they're saying, if you talk about death too much, you're going to invite death. Gurbani doesn't do that. Okay. What Gurbani actually does is that talks about death. If we look at our Nityanem, even in the Nityanem Baniya, in all three sections, in the morning, in the evening and at night, we are reminded about death. So death is something that actually becomes a part of our daily thought process and our daily thinking, our daily kind of conversation is around death. So if we look at the Shabads, for example, like in Japji Sahib, it talks about Kinta Kal. It actually says, wear a cloak of death. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is actually saying to you, on a daily basis, just as you wear your clothes, wear a reminder that death is hanging over you. Like that's a coat that you should wear every day.
Interesting.
In Anand Sahib in the morning, it says about Eho kutam tujhe dekhda challe nahi tere nale. So in Anand Sahib, and this is one of the morning prayers, it actually says, why haven't you recognize that this family is not going to go with you? So imagine every day in your morning meditation, in your morning affirmations, you're saying to yourself, my family is not permanent. So Gurbani tries to deal with this idea that we're not permanent. And I think that's a very important thing. So we're talking about how does Gurbani help you avoid the grieving process when it happens, because it's definitely going to happen. Death is definitely going to happen, but grief is avoidable. Grief is a choice.
And how can we, use the Guru's philosophy or our Bani to help us deal with that grief? Because some people may not necessarily be able to, they may not be doing their part, they may not be able to read Punjabi, they may not understand it. So for them, what you've just said now is so relevant that you've made it quite clear. Every day, Bani talks about it.
Yeah.
So, what can those people do that maybe may not necessarily understand it, but use the good Bani or even simran, something that could help to deal with, that feeling of grief?
So I think what we're doing here is we need to be very clear about what is the purpose of Gurbani. What is Gurbani trying to do? And Gurbani, first and foremost, is trying to change our thinking. That's the point of Gurbani, is that it's trying to give us a new way of looking at life and a new way of dealing with life. So let's look at how we talk about death in English, and then how does Gurbani talk about death?
Okay.
So in English, what do we say? There's a really interesting word that we use when we experience the death of a loved one. What do we say? We say we've lost our loved one, yeah? I've lost my uncle, I've lost my father, I've lost this. That's a really interesting word. When you say lost, what do you mean? So if you say to me, I've lost my phone, yeah? If you say to me, I've lost my phone, what you mean is the phone belonged to me, it was mine, and I planned to keep it for quite some time. It was my phone.
Yes.
And this is the same language that we use with our loved ones. I lost my father. And what I mean by that is I don't I don't expect to lose him. In fact, he's mine, he belongs to me. Gurbani changes this thinking drastically. Gurbani doesn't ever use this idea that you owned that item. And when we talk about, and I think people might think I'm just using semantics and just talking about language. Actually, this language plays a very big part about how we think. And Gurbani, the word Bani, is the Guru's language. We have to adopt the Guru's language. So we don't ever use the words like, I've lost my loved one,
no.
Because what we're saying is, that loved one never belonged to you in the first place. And this is such a key message in Gurbani, that the Guru tries to make you aware that this never belongs to you in the first place. There's a really interesting shabad that I actually want to read out by Guru Arjan Dev Ji that talks about this exact idea. So this is a shabad, Gaudi Mahala Panjwa, Ra Gaudi, Mahala Panjwa, the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev Ji. Guruji says, Kaki Mai, Kaki Bap, Kako Bap. Whose mother is this? Whose father is this? Naam Tariq Chuthe Sabsak. They are relatives only by name. All relatives are false. Let's think about this.
That's true. Very deep.
What do we say? We say, this is my mother. And we just instinctively think that's who she is. She belongs to me, I belong to her. We've had years of a relationship together, and I've learned a lot from her, and she's given a lot to me, and I've given a lot to her. So what we do is we've created an association, but just for a moment, stand back and think, is that person in any way connected to you in reality? They are a complete, distinct, separate person who has their own life story, they have their own background, they have their own aspirations and their own thinking processes, and then there's you. So you may have even created this relationship because you're saying, well, I came from this person, like I grew in my mother's womb. But in reality, as soon as you're born, that separation is gone. You're not connected to that person. And this is what Guruji is trying to say in this Shabad. So Guruji starts by asking this question, who is this mother? Who is this father? And other Shabads talk about, where have they gone? They died. Where did they go? And it's about changing our way of thinking. Well, maybe they were never mine to begin with. So Guruji goes on to say, Kahe ko Murak Pakhalaya. Why are you screaming and shouting? And Guruji, sometimes Gurbani uses almost a very parental-like telling off for us. When we continue to mourn the death of our loved one, Guruji takes a little bit of a harsh approach.
Okay.
Kind of like a parent that's trying to remind a child who keeps making the same mistake again and again. The parent, how's a parent going to react? Firstly, they're going to be loving and explaining it to you. But if the child keeps making the same mistake, sometimes the parent has to be a little bit strong and say, okay, you need to just stop this now.
Yes.
So the Guruji uses the word here, murak, saying, aren't you being a little bit foolish?
Okay.
Why do you keep doing this? By hukam, by your hukam, you were born into this family and you came into this world. This relation is actually nothing to do with you.
Okay.
So you didn't create this relationship, you didn't choose this relationship, it was just something that happened to you. Guruji says that we are all one clay and one light, that all of us are essentially just puppets made out of this one clay. Like your body is no different to my body, your flesh is no different to my flesh, your bones are no different to my bones, and they don't belong to you, they don't belong to me. Did you create your bones? Did you create your organs?
No.
And we can go back and think, actually, let's not think about the other person that's died. What am I? I'm not this body. I didn't create this body. I didn't create any of this. And Guruji says one breath of life has been put into all of us. So who are you crying for? Now, this is a very interesting idea. Guruji goes on to says, Mera kar billahi. Everyone is dying because they're saying, mine, mine. This is mine. I lost my father. I lost my child. And Guruji is really saying, let's have a think about this. Were they ever yours? So Guruji then goes on to says, life energy never dies. Maran har e jira nahe. And now this is a fascinating idea. And the Guruji is trying to convey to us, you know, when we think that someone has died, what has actually died? If you think about in the Western cultures, the body of that person is still there. They just bury the body and they put it in the ground. Yeah. So that's still there. What is it that's died? It's this life energy that's left them. Well, there's a way of thinking about that, and you've sort of hinted at this question quite a few times of how do I deal with this
Yes.
this idea?
Yeah.
Well, the way that we think of life and the loss of life is we think they've vanished, they've disappeared. Guruji is actually saying life never dies. So what that means is the life that was in your uncle, your grandmother, your child, your friend, your lover, that life is actually still here.
Right.
That is actually all around us all the times. So that life energy, that same life energy is in the trees. That life energy is in the breeze, it's in the sun, it's in the stars, in the moon, in the birds, in the grass. You can actually connect with the aliveness of that person by acknowledging that that aliveness is still here. And in fact, that aliveness is what you breathe in.
Yes.
I'm breathing in life energy all the time. That's why I'm still alive, because I'm breathing. This life energy is keeping me alive. That aliveness never actually leaves you. And so that's a very fundamental way to actually help us heal in this process.
And Baji, listening to that, it is, because this is something that we're not necessarily aware of, which is why we end up, you know, we have that attachment. This is another thing. We have the attachment, we have the expectation, whereas Barney tries to, I guess, prepare you to not have that attachment by saying, well, nothing is yours. Anyway, ultimately it's not. So that's a really important way of looking at it. And it's a very positive, because we tend to think of it in a negative, but you've turned it into a positive to think actually it exists in a tree or it exists here, you know, so that's really brilliant to know. So thank you for sharing that. But then, you know, the other thing I'd like to know is, Gurbani seems to suggest though that Naam is the solution, like, to our suffering. So could you please explain, like, how does that work? Because Naam is very important.
I think that's a fundamental question. First and foremost, we have to understand that Naam is much more than mantar. Gurbani has used the word Naam a lot more than mantar. But when we think about Naam, we think about just saying a word.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do. That's mantar. Gurbani is talking about Naam, which is actually a far greater concept.
Okay, so on that, Naam is one thing, which I've always thought is simran.
Yes.
Mantar is, see, so if we could
Mantar,
have
the
a
word
bit of...
mantar means to recite a word again and again. That's literally what the word mantar means. Gurbani places a lot of emphasis on doing mantar, but Naam doesn't end with just mantar. Naam ends with an awareness of hukam. So what's really interesting is, if you look at the Japji Sahib, which we can argue is the most fundamental ideas of Sikhi and the concepts of the Guru all sort of wrapped into one Bani. In the beginning of Japji Sahib, this emphasis on hukam is so strong that we actually skip past it too quickly when we're reading our Japji Sahib. We don't really spend enough time trying to understand it.
True.
And we'll notice as you read more Gurbani, you realize that Naam and hukam are actually used interchangeably. So when Guru says that Naam is the solution, Guru means that you have to be aware of what is going on in reality. That's what Naam Simran does to us. Naam Simran is a very useful practice. Before I go into that, I really want to go through how does normal society deal with this.
Yeah, please do.
Let's talk about that for a moment.
Let's talk about that.
The grieving process that we talked about earlier on in the show is a 5-step process that modern psychology talks about.
Right, okay. So
modern psychology says that there are 5 stages that we go through when we lose a loved one. The first thing that we go through is denial. So as soon as somebody passes away, you don't allow yourself to have an emotion. You keep yourself busy with the funeral arrangements and all the family that are visiting you. And you say, I'm okay, I'm okay. So that's the first thing that we do, is that we actually have this sense of denial. And what we're doing there straight away is we're creating a fear of dealing with the real emotion, that this pain of this emotional pain that we're feeling. So the first thing is denial. Then it goes on to anger. So people who lose a loved one, they actually have this feeling of anger. I'm really angry. Why did you have to go? Why did you leave me? You know, I was just about to get married. You should have been there. Or I've just had my young child. You should be there to support me. So people go through anger. Then they go through a stage called bargaining. And these are the stages in sort of modern psychology, which is that we resolve to prayer. Oh God, don't let this happen. Let me change it somehow.
Yeah, we look to God too.
Then we go through depression, which is that we realize we can't actually do anything about it. And depression is really interesting, because what that means is at some point you realize that I don't have any control, I can't change this scenario. The final step is acceptance.
Okay.
The final step is acceptance. So you go through this 5-step process, and acceptance is what we call hukam. Now Guruji starts with acceptance and says, before the death happens, prepare for it.
Right.
And so our method is not leaving acceptance right to the end. What we actually do is we accept before it happens. And I'll give you a very personal and very practical example of what I actually do. One of the things that I do in my daily life is when I leave my house and leave the children and my wife behind, if I'm dropping my children to school, if I'm saying goodbye to my wife as she goes to work, one of the things that I do is that I acknowledge within my mind every day that could be the last time I see them.
Okay.
So I drop my children to school and say goodbye and have a nice day, and I walk away and I remind myself that could be the last time I see them. So what am I doing? A lot of people will say that's a very morbid way of thinking. Well, it isn't actually a morbid way of thinking. The morbid way of thinking is having utter grief at the end when it actually does happen. This is actually a very healthy and very practical way of dealing. When I wake up in the morning, every day I acknowledge this could be my last day today. I prepare myself that I could die. If I say that every single day, today could be the day I die, you know what? One day that's actually going to happen.
Makes sense.
I don't know when it's going to happen. Don't assume you're going to live till you're 100 years old. Every day, I could die today. And this is a very healthy, practical way of saying, I'm preparing and I'm willing to accept hukam no matter what. Now, it'll be nice if I don't die today. It'll be nice if my wife and children don't die today. But I'm not going to hold on to that idea, please don't let them die.
Understand.
And this is what we do.
Yeah.
Please don't let them die today. Please don't let them die tomorrow. The reality is, I'm not going to hold on to either of that way of thinking. I'm actually going to say, they could die today, and I'm going to prepare now.
Yes.
If they don't die today, that's a bonus. But if they do die today, I've already dealt with their death. So their death has already happened to me. I'm going to deal with that emotion now, and do that with every person.
Yes.
Don't assume. Look, the reality is, we can't assume that we even have the next breath.
Yeah.
That's a real reality. And we can say, yeah, that's true. But how true have we made that? Like when we breathe, are you okay when you breathe in that you might not breathe out? Are you okay with that?
No, it makes sense. Yeah, exactly.
And you have to be okay with that. So meditation and Nam Simran is a daily practice that I am going to die, and make Nam Simran a death.
Okay.
Now what do I mean by that?
Yeah, because when you're saying Nam Simran, I'm thinking of just doing your Simran. So if you could elaborate on that, of what we need to do to help us.
Right. Gurbani says, die into Nam.
Okay.
Gurbani says, die into the Shabad. And what that's saying is, do Nam Simran in such a way, not that I'm trying to call God,
No.
or I'm trying to remember God.
Okay.
Do Nam Simran to die.
Okay.
To do Nam Simran to the point at which all you're acknowledging is life is here, and I am an insignificant part of life.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
One of the ways I like to think about Nam Simran is, Nam means na main. I am not.
I am not.
I am not. So the whole purpose of Nam Simran isn't to say, God, make me feel better.
No.
God, I want to see you. The whole point of Nam Simran is, you are here and I don't need to be here. In fact, I'm not here. In fact, this body isn't me. One of the words that Gurbani uses, Gurbani says that we are all walking corpses.
Right.
When do we ever see ourselves in that way? What do we mean by that? Gurbani says, you are a body within which life has been put in. And what do we say? This is my body, this is my life.
Yeah, we do.
Gurbani says, don't use that language.
Okay.
Gurbani says, this is a body and life has been put in, and we don't know when life is going to be taken out.
Yeah.
Do Nam Simran in such a way that acknowledges life as the most important thing, not you as the most important thing, to the point at which you can become so comfortable
Yes.
with the idea, look, Nam Simran is a bit of a death.
Yeah.
Right? When you wake up early in the morning, that's like a time when everyone says, I don't want to wake up in the morning, my life is too important, my sleep is too important. The Gursikh actually says, my life is not important. Acknowledging the greatness of the universe is more important. So it's kind of like a death, like you wake up first thing in the morning. What I mean by death is that you don't really care about your own needs and wants.
Right.
Kirtan Sohela, very interesting. At the end of the day, we read a Bani that is supposed to be read when somebody dies. We read that every night.
We do, yes.
So what we're doing is every night we go to sleep acknowledging, I'm going to die and I'm okay with my death. We normalize death to such a point. Let's take Kabirji. Kabirji takes death to one step further. He says, Mohe marne ka chao hai.
Which, and that means?
He says, I want to die.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to death. Kabirji also says, Jis marne te jag dare mere man anand. That death that everybody is so afraid of, I find bliss in that.
Okay.
So Naam Simran has one purpose alone, for you to die. So you're meditating that you are so great.
Okay.
That's nothing to do with me. I'm not important. So this is the whole purpose of Naam Simran, is that we create such a comfort with our death, that death is no longer something that we're shying away from.
Yes.
Death is not something that we're afraid of. So this is the language of the Gursikhs, and this is why I think, when normal people talk about death, they talk about loss and pain. Gursikhs don't talk like that, and we see great examples where Gursikhs have lost loved ones and they're using the Guru's Bani, they're using the Guru's language, which is that this is fine, this is hukam. Didn't we know this was going to happen?
Yeah, do you know what, Baji, that's been so insightful and really informative, like for myself and for the viewers, because you've just, for me, what I gauge from that is attachment, really. We shouldn't have that attachment,
Yes.
and we should obviously wake up every morning to have that acceptance of this is our last day. But we've got a few minutes until we wrap up for the show. Time goes by so quickly. Is there anything more that you would like to say to the viewers on this topic?
So, one of the things that I think we have to understand is that grieving is a process by which we need to try and heal ourselves. What are the ways that we can use to heal ourselves? I think the traditions that we have when a person dies within Sikhi are actually very useful for our healing process. So what we do is, rather than everybody coming to our house when one of our family members has died, rather than everyone coming and just doing Afsos. Afsos is very much a Punjabi tradition, which is that I'm going to sit here and talk about how terrible the idea of this death is. The Gursikh tradition is actually, no, we're just going to sit and listen to Bani. So what we do is we start a Sahaj part straight away. We start reading Gurbani every day. So the people who come visit our house, we say, don't come and sit with us, sit with the Guru. So you start learning. That's a very healing, very therapeutic process. So Sangat, we start singing together.
Yes.
We start singing songs of death. Guru Granth Sahib Ji is full of songs and shabads which are reminding us death is coming, be comfortable with death. So it's a very healing process. The cremation process is also very healing. We actually end by cremating the body, so we don't create an attachment to the body. We say, thank you for being here, but we're going to say goodbye to you. So there's a lot of healing in Gurbani and there's a lot of healing in Sangat. Use those to help you heal.
Thank you, Baji. And really quickly, if you could give your website address or contact details if anybody wants to get in touch with you or has any questions.
So I represent an organization called Nanak Naam. It's a small Gurbani-based charity that helps deal specifically with mental health issues, with issues around meditation. It's a meditation and a mental health charity, and we are at nanaknaam.org.
Okay.
That is a website. We're also on Facebook, Nanak Naam, and on YouTube. Okay. So we've got hundreds of videos dealing with this specific area. So thank you very much for allowing me to be on the show.
Thank you so
much.
much. God bless you. Sangatji, I hope this CV enjoyed Kitta hearing about the topic, but also that Baji is available if you need to contact him. Go to his website for any questions that you may have. Next week we have Basics of Sikhi Sevadars coming on, so please do tune in. Have a very good week ahead. Bless you all to be in Chardi Kala. And if mere to koi galtiyan hoya, please manu maaf kariyo. Bhulla chukka di maafi. Vaheguru ji ka khalsa, Vaheguru ji ki fateh.